That is a huge try.
What a pass again. Oh, that's a bullet ball.
Opens up. Huge hole through the middle.
And Danny Norman charging up the field for a team, trying to get them home in this series.
You are listening to the Touch Heads podcast. Here are your hosts, Danny Norman and Mitch Walkerton.
G'day Touch Heads and welcome to another episode of the Touch Heads podcast. I'm Mitch Walkerton and my co-host, Danny Norman. Hey Danny.
Hello Mitch. I always this is so stupid, but every time someone says Danny Norman, I'm like, who? Oh wait, that's me.
I've gone to say Danny
so
Davis and I'm like, I've got to correct myself. And
It just rolls off the tongue. Like DD, Danny Davis, and now I'm like, wait, I'm Danny Norman. I keep forgetting that. How's your week been?
It's been great. It's been really good. Yeah. The home renos moving along, and I got my study back, so I'm not sort of hiding and doing other bits and pieces. Yeah. So that's certainly, one of the highlights of my week. But you know what my other highlight was, Danny? And I messaged you this. So last weekend, I met your man Pete for the first time in person.
Oh, yes, I know.
Right? So I never knew.
What are
you
your first
4 months
impressions?
Oh, champion bloke.
Don't toot his horn. He's a dick.
Cut it out. I never knew you and obviously don't know him, but it was just one of those things where I saw him and it's like, we don't know each other, but it was like, we do know each other. It was like, hey mate, how you going? Hi.
Yeah.
It was just genuine and it was just, it's hard to describe, but it was just, it's like bumping into someone you haven't seen in a long time, even though it was the first time. Anyway, so it was just, it was good.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah,
How good.
It was good. So I feel bad that, all the podcasting stuff takes you away from him. And but anyway.
He's off camping again this weekend. He's taken Koa. He's up and left. So I'm just here, living my best life. I've got the night off tonight. I'm going to make myself some 2-minute noodles. I'm going to sit and watch Modern Family in bed and literally turn my phone off.
Nice.
People listening to that are like, what the hell? How old is she? And when you have kids, you'll get it.
For sure.
Pit and Peak. So I'm going to say your Pit was meeting Pete, obviously.
No.
And your
out.
Peak.
I can't tell you a downside. I can't tell you a downside this week.
You're just positivity. You're beaming with positivity.
Yeah.
Everything's just going good in life. If I had to say my Pit and Peak, I'd say Peak was watching, I got to go down and watch Zara and Nicholas, one of the Manly girls, get married on the weekend. So that was lovely to see. Yeah, Rob and Zara, shout out to them. And my Pit was Koa had gastro, but that also is my Peak because we were away and he got gastro with poor Kerry and Greg, Pete's parents. So they got the gastro.
See you later. We're at a wedding. We're at the Touch Awards in Sydney, living our best life.
Oh, another peak. The New South Wales Touch Awards, they were great as well. Yep, Women's Open Team of the Year. That was an absolute highlight. Stoked with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just a really fun weekend catching up with everyone in Sydney. Got to train with the Manly girls before State Cup as well, which was good. Pete got to train with the Manly boys before State Cup as well, which is good. And yeah it's all happening.
Yeah, it's all happening indeed.
All right, Mitch. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We have a really exciting guest coming on. Do you want to introduce to our listeners who's coming on?
Yeah, we have Chris Simon, who is the Chief Operating Officer of FIT. So it'll be a really, really good conversation. So stick around. G'day, Touch Heads. We have a very special guest on today's episode. It is Chris Simon, who is the Chief Operating Officer of FIT. And this segment is brought to our good friends by CLA Lighting. CLA Lighting is an Australian business. They've been operating for 25 years. So make sure you reach out to Heath and the team for all your lighting requirements. Chris, thanks very much for jumping on. If it's okay, I'm going to give our audience a bit of the background of, your history. In November 2024, you were named the inaugural Chief Operating Officer of FIT. Prior to that, you were the CEO of England Touch for 5 years. You are a current board member of the Nottingham Rugby. You're highly involved with Nottingham Touch and have had several roles with them. But probably what a lot of the people in the touch community will know is, or may not know, is you're the event director for the 2024 Touch World Cup, which was held in Nottingham. where you were responsible for delivering the biggest ever World Cup with 187 teams from 39 nations, 3,500 players, 200 referees, 300 event staff, and reportedly created £10 million an economic benefit to the community. So, yeah.
Chef's kiss. That's a bloody rap sheet, all right. That's amazing. Chris, we do a little bit of a thing on the podcast where we say our pit and peak of the week, usually for Mitch and I, but I want to ask you, what's the peak, like the best part of your job?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the World Cup was the one-off peak, and hopefully will be repeatable at some point over the next few years. But yeah, more generally, the peaks each year are the event season for me. I thrive on events. I thrive when the back's against the wall, there's things need solving. That's me. And I'm already saying to people at the moment, it's a bit quiet at the moment. There's no events over here in this part of the world. So yeah, no, so peak is definitely that for me at the moment.
And then what about your pit? What would be the worst part of your job?
I would say, so don't take this the wrong way, sat online rather than in person. Because, I'm a people person. I miss the England role. If I needed to go see somebody, I could jump in the car, jump on a train, or even walk, because most of it was around my doorstep here in Nottingham. Not quite so easy when you're doing the global role, and certainly that for me is the bit that I'm missing, is that human interaction with people. But I guess the pandemic taught us a different way of working, and I'm not probably alone in that world. There's probably a lot of other people feeling similar. And don't get me wrong, it's a little low rather than a big low. The highs are much better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that all too well here in Australia. We're in our own little island, isolated away from everyone. Obviously, we've got so much touch within our country and events going on all the time. But when it comes to international fixtures and things like that, we are a little bit isolated, I guess. What is the current status of touch football in the UK and more broadly in Europe? Obviously, you can probably touch more on the UK, as we said that you had that role as the CEO of England Touch. But more broadly, what would you describe the current status of touch football as?
It's a pretty good state. I think, it's leading the way in Europe, and certainly for England, it's key that Europe maintains the growth and development, can further England on, because England's leading the Northern Hemisphere. We're getting a lot of new countries approaching us at the moment in Europe, particularly in the Balkan states. We've been talking to Montenegro, North Macedonia, Albania, Greece. We had Ukraine join us this year and put in their first youth teams into events. England, as you know, puts teams in everything, but I think that the key growth in England we're seeing at the moment is around education, both at grassroots in schools, which is just starting to have more of a structured place rather than an informal role in schools, and particularly in higher education and further education of universities. And we've just got into our the British University Championships over here, which has just started. And numbers are up again, and there's 40 university teams taking part in that program at the moment. So it's in a good state of play. I think that there's always opportunity, and over here in pretty much the whole of Europe, the sport is still 100% participant funded. There's bits of money coming into the sport. Certainly England has got some sponsors now, which is great. But that's probably one of the big growth areas over here, is how do we spread the costs of the sport? How do we create more of an industry, as it is in Australia and certain parts of the rest of the world?
We do a lot of sport and touch footy in school. Like, I'm a school teacher myself, and the level of touch football that's played at the school level, and Mitch, you've got kids that are still school age, you would know as well. I think that's great to hear that you guys are getting into the school systems and really driving that grassroots and participation levels through those school systems. Like, we look at the 2025 Youth Atlantic Touch Tourney that was held in Ireland this year, and there were 12 countries, Belgium, Cayman Islands, China, England, France, Lebanon, Portugal, Scotland, South Africa, the Ukraine and Wales. Like, those participation, those countries participating in a youth event is just a significant reflection on what's being done at the grassroots level to be able to get them to those events. You must be so proud of what you achieved at those youth events and at the World Cup in Nottingham.
Yeah, absolutely. I think interesting to say that the youth over here, international competition is needed every year. The level is not close to domestic youth competition in Australia, and we chat to the team at TFA and indeed in New Zealand, and because of the regularity of high level domestic youth competition, The nations in the Southern Hemisphere don't need to travel so much, don't need that sort of international boundaries. We need it here every year. Every year there is demand for youth competition, and probably we could do it twice a year if there was the wherewithal. I think the World Cup last year, the Atlantic Cup this year, even going back to the Atlantic Cup in 2023, it's the volume of teams wanting to participate in international events is staggering. And I think we're getting close to the stages where we're going to have to split things up more, because there aren't many places in the world you can put 25, 30 fields. Yeah, maybe in Australia, but up here there aren't. And even in Nottingham with the World Cup, we had to split into two venues. We were lucky the venues were within a mile and a half of each other, but that's putting our sport under a bit of pressure, which I think is a good thing. And it's also putting it on the wider sporting landscape for hosting major events. And we're now getting interest from cities and locations who want touch to come to them because of that economic piece around the World Cup. And £10 million is not an insignificant amount. And certainly for Nottingham, for Nottingham it was unheard of pretty much. But still zero finance locally to get that over the line. I think we'll see an evolving industry for the sport outside of Australia, which has already got it. New Zealand in 28. I know we'll probably talk about that a little bit later, but the prospects I think are phenomenal. But it's just how we focus the limited resources, the limited time in the areas that can have the biggest impact, which is probably a combination of delivering our value to our members, our affiliate members and countries, at the same time as trying to bring new money into the sport that can further the growth.
So let's take Australia and New Zealand out of the conversation for a minute and talk about some of the high performances from European teams at the World Cup, specifically being produced by England. We've got the Women's Opens with the bronze medal, the Mixed Opens bronze, Women's 27 silver, Men's 30s bronze, Mixed 30s bronze, Women's 35 silver, Men's 40s bronze, Men's 50s bronze, Women's 45 bronze, and then I've got France in the Men's 45 taking off the bronze too. So taking off your COO hat for FIT and putting on your CEO of England touch hat back on again, what's England touch doing differently to produce results like this at the World Cup? Like, that is pretty phenomenal to be having that many bronzes and silver medals at that level.
Yeah, thanks. I think specifically for the World Cup, we set out structures, frameworks in place to succeed on and off the field. I think in hosting any major event, you want that success, and we set high performance as one of our key aspirations. It wasn't an event aspiration, but it was an England touch aspiration, and we pretty much hit where we wanted to do. And I think certainly the Opens medals were particularly rewarding and very much put England on the international map. I think England's been driving forward the European market for some time. If you look at, and I can't comment a little bit so much on what happens elsewhere around the world, but England put huge amount of time and effort into volunteering, people structures, and the volunteers are phenomenal in this country. And I don't know, particularly in touch, I don't know any other sport like it where you have such a huge workforce volunteering nationally for the governing body. You get it in local clubs, you get it in local areas, but you don't get the same volume. And England's probably have 200, 300 people who regularly volunteer on coaching administration. So I think that's a significant difference. And that is partly an English culture. Volunteering is partly in the culture over here, but partly I think the sport of touch, having had no money historically for 20, 30 years in this country, has had to find a way around it. So I think that's been quite important. I think the other bit is the level of expertise we've had, and that's not just English born and bred expertise. I think going back 10 years, it was a lot of people coming over from Australia, New Zealand, even South Africa, who probably brought that touch expertise with them. And we've evolved that into making it more of a homegrown talent as well. And that's off the field and on the field. And if you look at the makeup of the squads and the coaching setup in last year's World Cup compared to probably 2015 when we were in Coffs Harbour, is quite different. And age profile, the number of homegrown talent is quite different. And if we look ahead to the next programme, England Opens programmes have just been, I think it's been announced yet, but certainly the athletes are aware. It's very young, it's very English, and I think the prospects are even more going that way. So I think it's probably a combination of off-field structures, people, volunteering. I can't put enough emphasis on how important that one is.
Chris, if I'm not mistaken, I think the English squads came out to the Queensland and the New South Wales State Cups in 2024, and so that would have been a really, it's a huge, I guess, time and financial commitment for all the players, coaches, but I'm sure that you would have got a lot out of, that trip down under.
Yeah, absolutely. The players getting the battering at the time might not have realised it, but they certainly did. And ironically, looking back on that, there was some, and I was lucky enough to go to the Queensland one, but lots of players did both Queensland and New South Wales that year. And both men's and women's open were competitive in a number of games. Ironically, particularly the men's open. And the men's open will be the first to tell you that they were disappointed with the World Cup. It's those little small margins, isn't it? And small margins sometimes you don't manage to fulfil those. But Women's Open had a good State Cup, pretty good State Cup, and followed that through into 24, the World Cup. And they were very pleased with their outcome. I was very pleased with that. Both our daughters played Women's World Cup bronze medal, so it was a very nice experience for everybody involved. And I think, as you said, the State Cup was really well planned by the England setup, and I know they're looking at State Cups. I think next 26. I think it will probably be maybe 27 as they sort of progress into New Zealand in 2028.
We sort of mentioned 2026 is a busy year. The Opens is in Brisbane in April. I believe the European Touch Championships are in France in July, and then the senior Asia Pacific is in Japan in September or October, I believe. So very, very busy for you with regards to the tournaments and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely, Mitch. I think that for me is exciting. That's where I feel at home, and I think this summer was brilliant. It was great for me. I go back actually to the start of our summer, which was May, and coming out to Redcliffe for the youth.
Yes,
Asia Pacific Youth. Yeah, and that was a really good event. I think it was late. We were late to market. We were all just really late at the same time as TFA going through the start of their changes internally. So the timing was difficult, but I think we collectively put on a reasonably good experience, and one that we can really learn from for next year going back to Redcliffe. But we had three events in Europe in the space of 4 weekends, and in my mind they were all quite smallish events. Yeah, the Atlantic Cup was big enough at 45 teams. But I guess by Australian domestic standards, they're tiny. They're little, like a little affiliate in the suburbs of Sydney, probably. So we're some of the complications are around the international travel, the culture. If it's youth, the safeguarding and welfare. So there's slightly different challenges sometimes. I think looking ahead to next year, the events are spread out quite nicely. April, July, October. We're going to announce fairly soon a youth event in August for Europe. But even so, it's spread out quite nicely. I think I'm quite excited next year about what an Opens and Seniors split might look like, because in Europe at the moment, it's together, and Euros could be 100 teams next July, which will be amazing.
Which is fantastic, right?
But, absolutely.
The logistic problems
and that's exactly, and that's where the sport is in Europe. And at that 100 teams, and I'm talking to nations about new nations this week. Greece, we'd like to be at Euros. Montenegro, we'd like to be at Euros. And I said, well, let's get membership sorted first, and then see where we get to next. But we want that aspiration. We want to be inspiring athletes of the future to want to take part. So I think for us, it's about getting the balance right, as I've said, between maximising the opportunity for our athletes participating. I think we're just starting to come into the world of how do we package our sport for a non-participant audience. There are not many people outside of probably Australia who watch touch who don't play, and actually what we want to be creating a part of the sport that people turn on their social media and are watching touch because it's exciting, if not more exciting than playing it. Probably at the moment, the only people that do that are probably parents and loved ones back home who will do it when they're playing. We want to challenge that norm a little bit, and I think that's the way the sport will probably go between now and maybe 2032, who knows, but just starting to look at making it not necessarily more commercial, but more content friendly from a consumption perspective. Right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, social media is bloody powerful. It can really change what people see from the outside looking in, particularly those that aren't playing the sport. I should ask, actually, has Croatia ever entered a team Chris, I'm part Croatian, and I would love to know if Croatia's got a team.
They haven't.
Did you not know that,
but
Mitch?
No, I didn't know that. We better message the Australian High Performance that you might
I'm
not
going
be
to start
available
Team
for the 2028
Croatia.
World Cup. You're switching allegiances.
My grandmother was actually born in Blato on the island of Korčula. She lives in Australia now, but she moved when she was 16. And my sister Shelley and I always joke about one day starting a team in Croatia.
Well, you should watch out for it, because this weekend there is an event in the Balkans. I think it's their first touch event they've pulled together, only very low key. But we're watching with interest, because for us it's really exciting, that part of Europe, which then draws into sort of Western Asia for us. I think is where there's a lot of scope for development.
That's great.
Oh man, I got to get over there. I'm going back to Croatia. Chris, how are those youth events that we just touched on? How are they key in the lead up to the Touch World Cup in 2028?
I think I think very very key is the blunt answer. Where the youth program is at globally is slightly different north and south hemisphere, and I think that's where we're trying to align that a little bit more. So southern hemisphere, well, particularly Australia, New Zealand, very strong domestic competition. Often 12s, 14s, 16s, 18s, 20s tends to work. The international focus for those teams, for those countries, is 18s and 20s, whereas largely down to the fact from a safeguarding, welfare, travel, and they've got high level competition at lower age groups. In the northern hemisphere, the focus tends to be on younger ones, because they don't have the same level of domestic touch at 12s, 14s, 16s. And at the moment we're at 15s, 18s and 20s in Europe, or the Atlantic Youth Cup. There were 16 under 15 teams took part in the Atlantic Cup in Ireland. So that was the biggest, across the three, that was the biggest categories. So it says where the European nations want to focus. They want to focus a bit younger, because that embeds sport in those people's mindsets, particularly alongside other codes of rugby, where it's often if somebody's playing league or union and they start to not like it for whatever reason, we lose them to the sport. And I think the strong message we're saying is, let's keep them in the sport. Let's give them the skill set, some of the handling and the different skill set alongside rugby league or rugby union, so that at least they're there or thereabouts. Yeah, so going back to in terms of that importance of youth, I think it's critically important, at not just that really young age, and that might not be for 28 World Cup, it might be for 32 World Cup, but certainly in the 18s and 20s, the England, not just England, but I think the England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, France, probably those five nations particularly, we're seeing a really close connection from 18s to 20s to Opens at the moment. And the pathway, and some quite a bit of overlap at 20s and Opens. Obviously Australia's got much more people in terms of that age group and demographic to be able to draw from, but up here it is becoming much more of an important pathway, and I think that will continue. And I think you'll see. We've toyed with whether 20 should be part of an open setup. We're having those conversations more broadly. Whether that's on an invitational or not, but there is a really, I think, a much closer connection between 20s and Opens probably than there was 5-10 years ago.
Awesome. And the Touch World Cup's in New Zealand in 2028, and it doesn't seem like that far away now. We're back end of 2025. Do you have a month of when it's going to be held in a venue yet, or is that something that's still a work in progress?
It's working. I mean, we're looking at that also. I think we said probably a year ago we talked around the October window, and we're still keen on that October window if it's possible. We've met with Touch New Zealand several times. We meet pretty much every month for 6 weeks. We've got the next meeting next week. We're hopeful of securing the host venue, but that has been a competitive process, which is great. We've not had in the past before people wanting to bid for our events. That's maybe in Australia, but outside of that, it doesn't happen. So that's really, really healthy, and I expect us to be able to confirm that venue and the time of year probably in the first month or two of next year. We've just got a couple of things we're working on at the moment. One being is, how do we structure ourselves the most effectively organisationally? So and we're looking at how we do that collectively between us and Touch New Zealand, so that we can maximise the impacts for the World Cup. Not wherever we end up in terms of location, New Zealand, the rest of New Zealand, the Southern Hemisphere, and the world. We want to have what we did with England was great, but it was quite localised. It's quite localised, and how can we use that same footprint? We could be twice, 3, 4 times the impact if we get it right. And if we bring some external money in as well, I think that'd be really good.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was 187 teams in the 2024 World Cup, and you're obviously aiming to get more for the 2028 World Cup, and picking a venue and taking that all into consideration time of year will obviously be super critical in increasing those numbers, which I'm assuming is the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as I said, the 187 gave us, I think, 23 fields is what we needed to make it all work, and a week of competition. I think we haven't probably hit the sweet spot yet as what is the optimum for a World Cup. What's the optimum number of teams, number of fields, number of days? And how does it stitch together? Is it a two-week festival where we break it up a little bit? Is it two venues where we have all of your round robin somewhere, and then we have a stadia type feel? I think we're trying to toy with some of those things. Do we try and showcase certain categories? Do we have the Opens that are played in the evening, for argument's sake, and actually we're trying to create a bit of a crowd? I think there's a lot of things that we're starting to challenge ourselves on, not just going with what has been done before.
Yeah, what's comfortable.
Yeah, and I think we need comfort. We need to take ourselves out of the comfort zone and think, let's try. Unless you try things differently, you're never going to know. And the small event, the Opens event in Italy this year, we had the opening ceremony on the Thursday evening, and then we went straight into the host first game under lights in the stadium. And it was Italy mix versus France mix, nice local derby from that perspective. We probably had 1,000 people hanging around and watching that game, which was great. As a starter, that was great. So that's testing whether that concept works for us. We're talking about next year for Asia Pacific Opens is whether we have the outer fields running from 9 till 4, and then we have the stadia field running from 2 till 7 or 8. Why not? I think there might be reasons logistically that it's complicated, but actually challenging ourselves to do things differently and try things is what we want to do. And I think broadcast is another one that we have this balancing act with broadcast around maximising the showcasing of the sport to the world against delivering value for loved ones who want to watch their daughter, son, wife, husband watch from afar because they haven't been able to afford to go. So I think we're just looking at how do we get that right. I would love to stream every match on every field. I think that should be our aspiration. We can't do it with a 4-camera, 2 commentators. That's not going to happen. But how do we do things a bit differently? So I think for World Cup in 28, I'd expect things to be, it's 3 years away. We're already trialling things a year after World Cup. In another 3 years, it could be quite different. The experience that people get watching at home or watching live or participating, I think, could feel quite different. And I'm hoping that, that will be in a very positive and exciting way.
Yeah,
Can
that's
I just
amazing.
ask a question, Danny? What was the feedback with regards to 2 venues? Because, like you sort of said, there is logistic challenges as competitions continue to grow. And I see the downside of a 2-week event, sort of splitting an event. But then the trade-off might be that for the first 2 or 3 days, people are at a different venue. Was there any negative feedback with regards to that, or?
I think, there wasn't any underlying negative feedback. I think, when we took the decision to go for 2 venues, we had 3 choices. One choice was 2 venues. Second choice was cap the number of teams. Third choice was split the event. And this was probably about late 23. So we were only sort of 9 months out. And we thought, we knew the New Zealanders and Australians had already booked flights and sorted out logistics. So, sort of changing to timings was not really going to work. So then we were down to restrict teams, which we felt was against the spirit of our sport. It's inclusive.
For sure.
And at some point we might have to have qualification for World Cup, but we're not there at the moment. So as long as we can continue to deliver inclusivity, let's do it. So that it was almost the least evil, so to speak, let's call it. And so then we set up, but trying to say, and I think what was against us in Nottingham, and we've been doing Nottingham Touch for 20 years, but we're still a tiny little piece on the jigsaw in this area. It's a football town with rugby. What's touch is still what a lot of people say. So we were up against trying to embed touch across the city and across the community. But what we did manage to do is do a pretty good job at the university and connect the 2 university sites together with a pathway that was signed and felt like you weren't leaving one venue and arriving in another venue. You felt like you were just part of an event that happened to be spread over 1.5 miles rather than 2 venues. So I think that was the important bit for us there. That was what we wanted to do, because it wasn't in our original plan to have 2 locations. So we wanted to still give the participants the similar experience, the same experience as much as possible. And I spent time at both venues, conscious that actually I wanted to be part of the bigger event. And for me, the second venue, or the arm's length venue of Riverside, was more relaxed, chilled, less stressful. Actually, a really pleasurable experience. Pitches were not as worn. It just felt really nice. The moment you go back to Highfields and the hustle and bustle and the fan village, it felt as though it was just a bit sort of intense, and everyone was trying to do a bit too much. But so I think there's a happy ground in the middle. What we want to try and get to is an identity for the World Cup. What does it feel like wherever you are, and you feel part of a festival? We've always talked about the moment I land in that country, or whether that be by boat, by plane, whatever it is, I want that to be my welcome. And actually, so our challenge for New Zealand is wherever we end up, wherever it is, and wherever the airports are or the stations coming into New Zealand, we would like to discuss with New Zealand, how do we start the journey there so that people arrive, and if they arrive a week before and go home a week after, and it's a 3-week journey, we want their experience to be 3 weeks. So that's the bit we've got to tweak and play with a little bit, because that's what the Olympics does phenomenally well. And we are tiny in relation, but World Cup was only about 20% smaller in operational scope than the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. So we are the World Cup in 28. I suspect in terms of athletes and participants will be as big as the LA Games in Olympic Games in America. Not far away. They talk about a 10,000 athlete profile. We could quite easily have 10,000. 250 teams, 20 per 5,000. Add on your referees.
It's going to be massive. It's going to be massive.
Yeah. We could have 10,000 people, and then they're all going to bring a +1 or +2. We could have 30,000. It could be like a Lions tour coming to New Zealand, and then you start to think, people start to wake up and realise the impact this event can have on others, and the real positive one. So they're the sorts of things we're trying to sow those seeds at the moment, to say the scale of this event is there's almost no ceiling, because I know we can just keep offering. It might be we could add something on here. We're talking about adding on military services. That's an opportunity. We're talking about, I mentioned about 20s, whether that happens or not. We've talked about extra age groups, mixed women's, men's. So 250, 300 teams. You go bigger if we want to. So it's about getting that balance right of scalability versus value, and what is still going to be a participant-funded event, hopefully not 100% participant-funded, with some funding and some sponsorship that we can get in.
Wow, sky's the limit. I mean, you probably just answered my last question, Chris. I wanted to ask you where you see the game going internationally in 5 years' time. Could you give our listeners a bit of an insight from FIT's perspective?
Yeah, I think we should look 15 years, firstly, in 5-year blocks. I think because in most governments, they're 4 or 5 years. They can't do anything, because the moment you start doing anything, you're thinking about delivering. So I think we should be looking 15 years, and where will our sport be in 2040? Where could it be then? But then work that from 5 years. And the model should be what it is in Australia. And I know TFA have had their challenges, but it is a mass participation sport, team sport, an invasive sport that anybody can play, that's accessible from the moment you are born through to almost the moment you die, and everywhere in between. And ultimately, that it is a game. And I think what's nice in New Zealand is you see people throwing a ball around all over the place. What's nice in Australia, it's really embedded in education. In the Northern Hemisphere, it is just a competitive sport at the moment. And what I think the aspiration for the game of touch, and we talk about splitting the game and the sport. The game of touch should be possibly the most widely played game on the planet. That's not 5 years, might not be 15 years, but that's where I think it can go. And then work back from there, and the structures you put in place to make it happen. Well, education is key. You teach people something when they're young, and it doesn't necessarily mean teaching them touch, but it's teaching them to run, to pass, to catch, to jump, and put an oval ball in their hands. And all 3 codes of rugby, and probably American football, probably AFL, probably Gaelic football, will all be better off. So I think that's sort of that sort of opportunity to all work together with an oval ball but maybe a round ball in some guys, but something in your hands rather than your feet necessarily. So I think there's that bigger piece of where it could get to as a game. I think from a sports perspective, there will be a lot more money comes into the sports side of it as we showcase the top end of the sport more and more. I think our opens game is phenomenal. I think the athleticism needed now to perform at the top level is probably like any other top level sport, Olympic sport. I would like to see, physiologically in terms of anaerobic strength, power, endurance, those core skills where our sport sits alongside some others. It's not as big and physical, but I would suspect it competes. So I think and with that comes desire, aspiration to want to follow, get involved. And I think that you will see more stars coming through our sport over the next 5 to 10 years. I think children and young people will look up and think, I want to be that person, not because they're earning £10 million a year, but because they're athletic, they're fit, they're healthy, and I think that whole health and well-being piece is quite at the forefront of the agenda at the moment. So I think that's sort of more philosophically where I think the sport could be in a few years. I think 5 years' time, I think we'll have come out of a World Cup, a very successful World Cup, possibly the last World Cup where everybody's together, because I think scalability that might force us to change. Yeah, and I think the game, the sport element is almost split into three. You've got the youth program where there's money, it's parent buying power, and we want to put on a really good event that provides as many people with the inspiration of taking part. We've got the seniors masters at the other end, which is again lifestyle, a lot more around experience, where we host those events. I think Japan next year is critical for that sort of processes. We know a lot of people want to go to Japan. We could probably put on tiddlywinks and they'd still want to go. And I think that's the thing. So it's about how we get that package right. It's a bit tongue in cheek, but it is that it's much more about the destination, as the destination versus event is slightly more skewed then. So that's the seniors bit. And with that will come spending power, that economic impact piece, most definitely, because they will bolt on time after the event. They'll bring loved ones. So both at ends of the spectrum, they bring plus ones, plus twos. The spending power and the economic impact is quite big. So I think that will secure us more investment into the sport to fund the middle, which is our Opens programme, which is lower numbers, because 3 categories rather than any more. I think that I can see something around inclusivity, more inclusivity in the future, and whether we have a Opens category, i.e. anybody can play. I'd like to look at the mixed game. I'd love to see the mixed game evolve so that it's genuinely mixed. That's my personal view rather than so actually a mixed team of 16 is 10 and 6, isn't it? Well, that's not mixed. It should be 8 and 8. And in a 14, it shouldn't be 10 and 4 or 9 and 5 or 8 and 6. It should be 7 and 7. And actually on the field, you've got to have somebody in the middles. So I think we could evolve that concept, particularly as we start to look forward to a potential Olympics, and whether that's Brisbane 32 or wherever in 36 or 40, the product fits. So let's evolve it a little bit so that the Olympics want to come to us and say we need touching in our next Olympics, rather than us trying to sell it into Brisbane.
Yeah, awesome.
2040, Danny, you will be able to play women's 40s for Croatia.
I'll be dead.
You'll be playing women's 40s.
Oh my God, how exciting.
Frightening.
My baba will be so proud of me. I'm putting Blado on the map. That's awesome. Well, Chris, I think we might wrap up, Mitch, unless you have any other questions that you want to.
This has been great. I really thank you for coming on, Chris.
Yeah, no, cool. Thanks so much. Nice to talk to you both. It's cool.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we can get you on maybe after all the events at the end of 2026, and we can have a little bit of a reflection and recap and talk about 2027 and what's in store for touch football around the world. But I'm sure our listeners will be very appreciative of hearing your point of view and getting a bit of insight on how touch works around the country. I love that you made the comment about people looking up to the athletes and people in our game, not because they're getting paid millions of dollars, but because we have a genuine love for our sport. And it's pretty clear that you have a genuine love for the game and what you're doing. And we thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you very much. Cheers, both. Thanks so much. Thanks, Danny.
Wow, that was such a great conversation, Mitch. Like, so epic to hear from Chris. And I hope that we can get a chance to talk with him after all of those epic fit international events next year as well.
Yeah, indeed.
So good. But we're going to wrap up for today, guys. I'll give you a little bit of a insight into what we're going to be talking about. So we've got the Queensland and the New South Wales State Cup coming up in 2 and 3 weeks. So we're going to do a State Cup preview. We'll also look at the Metro Cup. So just the Queensland competition specifically in next week's episode. And we have 2 very exciting guests lined up. We will not mention their names. We want to keep it a surprise. But 2 really exciting figures in the game coming in to talk about their State Cup preparations and what they're going to be doing at the State Cup this year as well. So thanks for tuning in, Touchheads. Like Mitch said last week, keep liking, keep following, keep subscribing. We love all of the support, so keep the nice comments up too, and we will see you guys next week.